The Wasteland, Section 3, The Fire Sermon. The Fire Sermon is the longest among the 5 sections of the poem. The fire is a sterile burning of lust. Eliot tries to evoke the format of a sermon. He might have been inspired by Buddha's sermon to his disciples, exhorting them to eschew the fires of lust. Saint Augustine's words on unholy passions too might have weighed with Eliot. It begins with a vision of the modern winter. Line number 176. Eliot alludes to the refrain in Edmund Spenser's Bartholomew, which describes the betrothals of Elizabeth and Catherine Somerset, daughters of the Earl of Somerset. The atmosphere is one of joy and fertility as opposed to the present state of pain and barrenness. In Spenser's Bartholomew, the scene described is also a river scene at London, and it is dominated by nymphs and their paramours, and the nymphs are preparing for a wedding. There is a contrast between Spenser's scene and the 20th century. Line number 182. The Jews bemoan their exile in Babylon. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. Luck is a lake, Lake Geneva, in Switzerland, locally known as Lac Léman. It may be remembered that Eliot wrote The Wasteland mainly at Lausanne near Lac Léman. Limo is also a euphemism for sweetheart. At my back, in a cold blast, I hear the rattle of the bonds. Eliot deliberately twists some lines from Andrew Marvell's to his coy mistress. But at my back, I always hear Time's winged chariot hurrying near. The lover is pleading with his love to abandon her coyness for the time being. The same line is echoed in 196 too. 189 refers to the Fisher King of fertility cults. Reference to Shakespeare's The Tempest. Ariel's song on the presumed drowning of Alonso, King of Naples, Prince Ferdinand's father. Sitting on a bank, weeping again, the king of others' wreck, this music crept by me upon the waters, allaying both their fury and my passion with its sweet air. Here too, Eliot spins the web of contrast. The dominant mood and theme of The Tempest is that of reconciliation and regeneration. But in The Wasteland, the haunting theme is infertility, decay, and death. Eliot refers to John Dace's The Parliament of Bees. When of a sudden, listening, you shall hear a noise of horns and haunting, which shall bring Actaeon to Diana in the spring, when all shall see her naked skin. Actaeon ventured to catch Diana, the goddess of chastity, in all her naked splendor, while bathing with her nymphs. He was severely punished for this violation. He was turned into a stag and was killed by his own hounds. One has to pay dearly when one gets drunk by love. Eliot uses imaginatively the allegorical reaches of this myth to comment on aberrant love that flourishes on the wasteland. Sweeney is a stock symbol of sensual man in Eliot's scheme. Mrs. Potter and her daughter, they are characters in cheap ballad sung during World War I by soldiers. It is alleged that they ran a boarding house in Cairo. They tried to protect themselves from venereal diseases. Eliot's critic suggests that this ballad was a parody of a popular song, Red Wing. Some relevant lines are like this. Oh, the moon shines bright on Mrs. Potter and on the daughter of Mrs. Potter, and they both wash their feet in soda water. And oh, those children's voices chanting from the choir loft. Eliot refers to Verlaine's Parsifal. Paul Verlaine, French poet, describes the quest of Knight Parsifal. While questing, he withstands the seduction of a temptress. In acknowledgement of his purity, before entering the castle to heal the wounded king, the knight's feet are washed, while the children went on singing from the choir loft. Tereus' violation, raping of Philomela is contrasted with the purity of Parsifal. Smyrna, now known as Izmir in western Turkey, a well-known trading center of ancient world. Line 212 is a demotic language used by the ordinary people. Cannon Street Hotel is a famous hotel at London where the business houses are situated. Metropole, a luxury hotel in the seaside resort Brighton. The reference is to the homosexual proposition advanced by Mr. Eugenides to the protagonist. Some critics deem it as autobiographical. Eliot himself admits it. Tiresias. Eliot reckons Tiresias as a comprehensive and complex symbol of the diverse experiences of modern man, underscoring the modern predicament arising out of lust, aberrant sex, barren spiritual values. Eliot observes, Tiresias, although a mere spectator and not indeed a character, is yet the most important personage in the poem, uniting all the rest, and the two sexes meet in Tiresias. What Tiresias sees, in fact, is the substance of the poem. Eliot refers to Ovid's Metamorphosis, where Tiresias' sex transformation and retransformation are narrated. Tiresias' violent beating of the copulating serpents in the forest transformed him into a woman. After 8 years, when the act was repeated, she was changed back to a man. Thus, Tiresias could experience the joys and aches of both sexes, and perhaps could be a critic of both sexes. He weaves in another strand from the Roman legend relating to Jove and Juno. When Jove and Juno had a difference of opinion on the enjoyment of sex by gods and goddesses, the dispute was referred to Tiresias. He gave his judgment in favor of Jove. The angry Juno made him blind. Jove, in retort to Juno, to compensate Tiresias' loss, gifted him with forevision, the capacity to foresee things. Old man with wrinkled female breasts, seemingly an Ovidian echo, acts as a refrain. Eliot cites Sappho, Greek poetess of the 7th century BC. There is a prayer addressed to evening star to fetch the child back to his mother. There seems to be a more direct link with R.L. Stevenson's Requiem. A contrast between the old world and the modern world, where women and life in general are mechanized. Romance and love are lost words, lust and full are the watchwords now. Lines 228 to 30. The expected fall of man, as foreseen by Tiresias, is described in a casual and deliberate deflated key. Young man Carbuncular. There are multiple allusions to both Milton and Chaucer. Milton's sonnet to the Lady Margaret Lake and Chaucer's prologue to Canterbury Tales, his description of Sumner. Carbuncle is associated with loose sex and aberrant living. A Bradford millionaire is one who shot into fame through quickly acquired wealth. Bradford is an industrial town in Yorkshire, England, famous for woolen industry. During World War I, many industrialists became rich all on a sudden. The mechanical nature of love, reduced to dull sex, is almost clinically delineated with commendable case in satiric vein. Eliot refers the reader to Oliver Goldsmith's Vicar of Wakefield. He alludes to the scene where Olivia sings when she comes back to the scene of her seduction by Thornhill. When lovely woman stoops to folly and finds too late that men betray, what charm can soothe her melancholy? What art can wash her guilt away? The only art her guilt to cover, to hide her shame from every eye, to give repentance to her lover, and wring her bosom is to die. Eliot subtly contrasts the old order with the new. The very notion of morality, sexual purity, honor, etc. has undergone an unwholesome change. Eliot worked in Lloyd's Bank, situated in this street. Agnes Martyr is a fine church designed by Christopher Wren. It is situated in Lower Thames Street, London. This is a part of the famous German opera The Ring of the Nibelungen, composed by Richard Wagner. In The Twilight of the Gods, the Rhine daughters bemoan the loss of gold that they guarded for the Nibelungens. For the loss of gold resulted in the loss of their joy and the beauty of the Rhine River too. Both in content and form, Eliot closely follows Wagner. The poet seems to be influenced by Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness too. Isle of Dogs is a peninsula in the Thames. Lines 277 to 78. This is a refrain from Wagner, where the Rhine daughters weep over the loss of gold. Eliot refers to the fruitless amorous adventures of Queen Elizabeth and Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. These lines reverberate Enobabur's description of Cleopatra's barge and her sailing in Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra. Moorgate is a tube railway station at the east end of London. Margate is a seaside resort in Kent on the Thames estuary. Eliot began the composition of the wasteland here in 1921. To Carthage then I came. Eliot refers to the Confessions of St. Augustine. In this passage, St. Augustine remembers his youthful days in Carthage. Line number 308, Buddha's fire sermon. When he stresses the idea that everything is on fire, only when one is cleansed of base passions, one could easily be free and escape from rebirth. St. Augustine's Confessions. Here also, fire is conceived as a symbol of consuming and cleansing symbol. I entangle my steps with these outward beauties, but thou pluckest me out. O Lord, thou pluckest me out. Often, Joshua, the high priest, is referred to as the brand plucked out of the fire. Eliot, right from the title to the very end of this section, has used quite imaginatively the elusive possibilities of fire with its traditional and topical imports. The use of tradition and individual talent is amply evident in this section. This section has an abrupt end with a reference to St. Augustine, who represents Western asceticism, and Buddha, who represents Eastern.